To show you the design panel, I have a simple artboard here with a few elements on them, and this design panel will change depending on what you have clicked on. So here we have a basic home screen for a recipe website, and when we don't have anything selected, this design panel reflects the canvas or the background that the frames are sitting on. So here we can change the color of this background if we want it to be more dark, for example, or if we want the background to show in some exports. And we can also change the transparency and choose to enable pixel preview or pixel grid preview right here. So all of our design properties are around the background here because we don't have anything selected. So when we select this chef's hat, we can see the properties change to reflect this hat. So we can still move this around, and we can move the X and Y coordinates here, and you see the properties panel is changing. And we can also resize the width and the height, and we can lock the proportions. So if I want to change the height here to be 30, then the width is going to change to reflect that ratio. We can also quickly change the rotation by 15 degrees. And also, if you hold down Command while you're hovering over these anchor points, you can rotate them with your mouse as well. Now, one really nice feature in Figma are the constraints tools. With these tools, we can constrain any objects to the left top of this artboard or frame, or we can pin it to the right or the center. So we have all of these controls to constrain our objects for responsive design. For example, this one, if I choose to scale this, I'm going to click on this desktop frame now, and I'm just going to resize this, and you can see that both of these items scale here. Now I'm going to hold down Command Z and undo that. We don't want this to scale. What we want it to do is pin to the top left here. This one can pin to the top left, and maybe these guys here can pin to the top right. So we have those set up. And now when we rescale this, you can see up the top here, that behaves how it's supposed to. So as you can see, there's very nice controls here for constraints. And then we have a layers section. And this is where we can get some overlay settings if we want something to multiply. So white multiplied by anything is that color. If we change it to red, you can kind of see how it's transparent. I'm going to hold down Command here and zoom in so you can kind of see what that's doing. But you can play with some different overlay effects here and get a nice style that you want. I'm just going to change this back to white, and just normal is fine. So you have some nice opacity effects here. You can increase the transparency here, or just simply hide the layer if you want to. And then you have fill control. So this is where you'll change the actual color, and we saw that as I was changing this around. So you can change this to blue, and we can create a fill on top of a fill, which is really great. So if I click on this plus icon here, you can see that I have a linear fill on top of a solid fill. So that gives us this nice white on top of blue. And I can change the angle of these pretty quickly and just get a nice effect if I want one. Something like that looks good. And so multiple fill options. And within this fill color, you can fill with a solid color, a linear color, radial, angular, diamond, or an actual image. So if you click on image here, it's going to ask you to choose an image, and you can find one in your file and fill that image. If I ever want to delete a fill, I can just click on the fill here and just click this subtract button, and it'll remove that. And now I'll turn this back to white. And we have stroke, and again we can create multiple stroke colors. I'll just create this as blue. And I want this to be on the outside of the icon. You can change the weight. You have some nice dash settings if you want that stroke to be dashed, if you want the dashes to be capped, things like that. Now we also have some effects settings, and I'm going to show you. If I hold down Command and just scroll down, I'll zoom out here, and you can see this background here. We actually have two effects here. So when you click on the plus icon, it adds a new effect in here. I'm going to just delete this one. And then you can choose between an inner shadow, drop shadow, layer blur, or background blur. Now this background blur is really nice because you have the ability to turn down the opacity. I'm going to turn this to 70 here so you can kind of see what's going on in the background. And you can see this layer has blurred the background. And these settings can be changed right here. So I can decide I want this to be a 30 pixel blur. And you can see it's becoming more blurred. And then just tune the opacity however you want to see that blur in the background. Maybe I'll tune this to 90. And same thing with drop shadow. Just click this icon to see the blur settings. And if you want a Y coordinate here, if you want to drop this shadow down 2 pixels, that'll happen here. And you can change the opacity here, and also some overlay effects for that shadow itself. So very powerful controls just for basic shapes like these icons or these rectangles. You can also see this rectangle shape, I've actually removed the fill. So if it starts out with the fill, you can just click over here and click the subtract icon and it'll remove that fill. And now I only have a stroke. And with this stroke, I've actually created a dashed line here. So you can see that here. There's a 2 pixel dash and a 2 pixel gap. And if I click away, you can kind of see that dash and gap here. So with this chef's icon, with this rectangle and these icons, we get the same kind of design panel here that's meant for vector shapes. But now when I click on this background here, and we can see, although this looks like an image, it's actually a rectangle with an image fill applied. So we have this image fill here, and then we have a black 20% opacity layer fill on top of that. And then we have a linear fill just for the top, just to give a little black transition down so this text is easier to read here. So this is all one object, and it has 3 different layers. It makes it very nice to quickly go in and change some of these. So let's say maybe I only want a 5% opacity here. We can change that very easily. And if I want to edit this image at all, I can click on this little thumbnail. And I have some nice exposure controls. If I want to change the exposure, some contrast, change that here. And we can change the temperature if we want it to be warmer or colder. We can do that very easily. And then we have other controls like tint, highlights, and shadows. Now one thing I haven't shown you yet are the alignments and the distribution tools. So if I click on this icon here, and let's just mess this up a little bit. Just drag these around here. If I want these to be aligned, I can hold down Shift and just select the multiple items here. And I have some alignment controls up here to align things to the top, align them to the bottom. Now these are the same height, so top and bottom are both aligned, or align center. And then we also have distribute horizontal spacing, which will make sure that this has the same spacing between each icon. So if I wanted, I can click on these icons, just align them to this text here, and do that to start out with, and then hold down Shift and select these different objects, and we'll distribute these evenly, we'll align them evenly, and now we can move this text to be aligned with this object itself. So very nice to just have a clean design here. And now with different text layers, you can see we have some of the similar properties like constraints. We can resize here very easily. But now we have a text section. And this is where you're going to change your font styles, your weights, and the sizes. And if it's multiple lines of text, like we see here down below, we can change things like the line spacing. I'm going to change this to 120%, and you can see how that spacing increases here. Also the spacing between characters. So if we want to increase that by 15%, we can do that. And maybe I'll just do 5% because that was a bit dramatic. And also paragraph spacing. So if we want to change this to 20, you can see only the paragraph was spaced. And now we can align this text to the top of the bounding box, the center of the bounding box, or the bottom of the bounding box. So now if we change this bounding box to be taller, we can change where that lives inside of this box. We also have paragraph indentation and some alignment tools that you find in some common text editors. But there are some hidden effects here as well. So if we drag this down here and we click on this advanced menu, we have things like auto resize the width. And you can see what that did here. It made it as wide as the text allows. I'm going to hit undo. And we have some other objects like transform this to all uppercase, all lowercase, or just correct capitalization. And then we have some underline or strike through effects here. Makes it very handy. And then we have some more advanced font features like fractions, all small caps, superscript or subscript. And then we can change the way fonts are aligned by proportional alignment, tabular, proportional old style, or tabular old style. So a lot of great advanced features for fonts, as well as the normal stroke effects, layers, and constraints sections that you get with other objects. Now there's one more section we haven't talked about here, and that's the export section. And this is with every object that you select, you have the ability to export that object. So we have 3 icons here, and let's say we want to export this out as we develop for the iPhone. Well, we can click on this plus export, and we can see that this is going to export as a one-time PNG. And we can change this to JPEG or SVG, but if we only want PNG, we can click plus a few times to even export this out as 2 times resolution, 3 times resolution, and get multiple file sizes with just one export of this spoon. Same thing with this fork, just click this 1, 2, 3, and you have 3 different sizes that are going to be exported, and this knife, 1, 2, 3. So with this, we can quickly click preview and see how this is going to look in the preview, and then export this file into any folder that you want. Now, because I set these to be exportable, if I ever change them and then export, it'll actually export the changes. And I can click on this tool here to export in bulk all of the items I've already set previously to be exportable. They'll all be here, so I can do a one-time export of everything in my project.